I always thought my wedding day would be the happiest day of my life. And for about 4 hours, it was. Until my sister Amber decided it was the perfect moment to reveal she'd been sleeping with my husband. Well, technically, he was my husband for exactly 4 hours and 27 minutes. If you're thinking this is another sad story about a cheating groom, you're only half right. What happened next shocked our entire family, split our hometown down the middle, and ended up with me walking away from not just my marriage, but the family business my grandfather built from nothing. My name is Julia Reynolds, and this is the story of how I lost everything on my wedding day, and somehow ended up with more than I ever dreamed possible. And yes, my ex-husband and sister now have to drive 2 towns over just to grocery shop without getting dirty looks. If you've ever had family drama that made you question everything you thought you knew, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll either feel better about your own family or realize it's finally time for that therapy appointment you've been putting off. I grew up in Burlington, Vermont, in one of those families everyone in town thought was perfect, the Reynolds family, known for our maple syrup business that my grandfather started in his backyard and built into Reynolds Pure, now sold in grocery stores across New England. We were that family with the matching Christmas sweaters and the house everyone wanted to visit during the Fall Harvest Festival. My father, Richard, took over the business when my grandfather passed, and he ran it like a small empire. Every dinner conversation revolved around sap yields, expansion plans, and which one of us kids would eventually take the helm. My mother, Eleanor, was the quintessential Vermont matriarch. PTA president, church committee leader, and the woman who could whip up a maple pecan pie that once made the governor ask for the recipe. Then there was my sister Amber, 2 years younger than me, but somehow always seemed to be several steps ahead. While I was the responsible one with the business degree and the 5-year plan, Amber was the free spirit who dropped out of UVM to find herself before returning to work at the family business anyway, because, as Dad always said, Reynolds blood is thicker than maple syrup. I can't remember a time when I wasn't being compared to Amber. During my high school graduation party, I overheard my aunt telling my mother how photogenic Amber was after looking at my graduation photos, where I was awkwardly trying to hide my braces. "Julia's the smart one," my mother replied, as if beauty and brains couldn't possibly exist in the same daughter. When I was 16, I spent months planning my Sweet 16 party, carefully selecting the venue, the music, and even saving my allowance to buy a special dress. The day before my party, Amber broke her arm attempting a cheerleading stunt in our backyard. My parents canceled my party to take her to the hospital, which was understandable. What wasn't understandable was that they never rescheduled it, and when I brought it up weeks later, my father said, "Julia, you're too mature to be upset about a party." 3 months later, they threw Amber a Getting the Cast Off celebration that was bigger than my original Sweet 16 plans. Despite everything, I tried to be the perfect daughter. I graduated summa cum laude from Cornell's business school and returned home to help modernize Reynolds Pure. I created our online store, developed our organic line, and increased profits by 32% in my first year. Dad finally seemed proud, and for once, I wasn't living in Amber's shadow. He started taking me to industry meetings, introducing me as the future of Reynolds Pure. I thought I'd finally earned my place. That's when I met Ryan. He was a marketing consultant we hired to rebrand our products for nationwide distribution. Handsome, ambitious, and seemingly smitten with me from day one. After years of being the overlooked daughter, having someone choose me felt revolutionary. When he proposed after 18 months of dating, it felt like the beginning of my real life, one where I was the main character.
The wedding planning became my mother and I's first real bonding experience. For once, I was the center of attention. We decided on a ceremony at our family's maple farm, under the same trees my grandparents were married beneath. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for me, but to show everyone that Julia Reynolds could create something beautiful too. What I didn't know was that during those 18 months, Ryan had been meeting Amber at a motel just outside of Burlington whenever I was on business trips. What I didn't know was that the night before my wedding, when Amber hugged me and said she was so happy for me, she had just texted Ryan that she was pregnant. What I didn't know was that the grand gesture of family unity, my father's surprise announcement that he was retiring and naming me the new CEO of Reynolds Pure, was about to be the catalyst for the most humiliating day of my life. The morning of June 12th arrived with perfect Vermont summer weather, 75 degrees, clear blue skies, and just enough breeze to make the maple leaves dance. Our property was transformed with white tents, wooden farm tables adorned with wildflowers, and string lights hanging from the century-old trees. The same trees my grandfather had tapped when he started our family legacy. My mother bustled around our farmhouse, directing the catering staff while my bridesmaids and I got ready upstairs.
Amber, of course, was my maid of honor. She seemed distracted that morning, checking her phone constantly and disappearing to help with preparations every 30 minutes or so. I was too caught up in my own happiness to notice the way she winced when our mother gushed about what beautiful children Ryan and I would have someday. "You know," my mother said while helping me into my dress, "your father is finally going to make the announcement today, after the reception dinner." She squeezed my shoulders, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "He's naming you CEO, Julia. He's so proud of what you've done with the business." I remember feeling like everything was finally falling into place. The family recognition I'd worked so hard for, the man I loved, the future I'd planned, it was all happening. When my father came upstairs to see me before the ceremony, he had tears in his eyes. "You remind me of your grandfather today," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "He would have been so proud to see the woman you've become." Meanwhile, Ryan was getting ready with his groomsmen in the guest house. I found out later from his best friend Tyler that Ryan had been a nervous wreck that morning, drinking straight from a whiskey bottle and twice saying he needed to talk to Amber about something important. Tyler assumed it was last-minute wedding details. How I wish someone had been suspicious enough to question it. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Walking down the aisle on my father's arm, seeing 200 of our friends, family, and business associates standing in our maple grove, looking at Ryan waiting for me at the altar we'd built from reclaimed barnwood, it felt like a dream. Ryan's hands trembled slightly as we exchanged vows, which I interpreted as emotion rather than guilt. At the reception, the first signs of trouble began.
Reflective reading with slight melancholy and a growing sense of overcoming. Amber gave her maid of honor speech, which started normally enough with childhood anecdotes and well wishes, but ended with a strange comment. "To Julia and Ryan, may your marriage be built on honesty and transparency, the only true foundation for lasting love." She looked directly at Ryan as she said it, and he nearly choked on his champagne. During the first dance, Ryan seemed distracted, his eyes scanning the crowd instead of looking at me. When Amber disappeared from the head table during dinner, Ryan followed 5 minutes later, claiming he needed to use the restroom. They both returned separately, Amber with red-rimmed eyes and Ryan looking pale and shaken. "Is everything okay?" I asked him as we greeted guests at our table. "Perfect," he said, kissing my cheek mechanically. "Everything's just perfect." The tension built as the night continued. My father clinked his glass after dessert was served, ready to make his big announcement. The tent fell silent as he stood, commanding attention the way he always had. "Today is a day of new beginnings," he started, smiling at Ryan and me. "Not just for Julia and her new husband, but for Reynolds Pure as well." I saw Amber slip back into the tent from the corner of my eye, her face set in determination as she made her way toward the front. Ryan gripped my hand so tightly it hurt. "After 40 years of running this company," my father continued, "I've decided it's time to pass the torch, and there's no one more qualified, more dedicated, or more deserving than my daughter Julia to take Reynolds Pure into the future as our new Chief Executive Officer." The crowd erupted in applause. My mother wiped tears from her eyes. I stood to hug my father, overwhelmed with emotion and validation. This was my moment, everything I'd worked for. And then I heard Amber's voice, somehow cutting through the applause. "I have an announcement too," she said, not loudly, but with enough force that people around her fell silent, creating a ripple effect through the tent. My father frowned. "Amber, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time," she replied, walking toward our table. "Before everyone congratulates the happy couple and the new CEO, there's something you should all know." Ryan stood abruptly, knocking over his water glass. "Amber, don't! We talked about this." The tent fell completely silent then, 200 pairs of eyes darting between Ryan, Amber, and me. I remember the exact moment I knew. Not the details, but that something terrible was about to happen. It was the look of pity on our family friend Susan's face as she watched me, already sorry for what I didn't yet know. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between my sister and my husband of 4 hours. "What did you talk about?" Amber reached our table, standing directly across from me. She placed both hands on the tablecloth and leaned forward, her voice now loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm pregnant," she said, "and Ryan's the father." Time seemed to stop in that moment. The tent that had been filled with celebrations seconds earlier now hummed with shock. I looked at Ryan, waiting for him to deny it, to say it was some sick joke, but he just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Julia," he finally managed, reaching for my hand. I pulled away as if burned. "Is it true?" His silence was answer enough. My father stood frozen mid-celebration, the announcement papers still in his hand. My mother had her hand pressed against her mouth. "I'm sorry," Amber said, though her eyes held more triumph than remorse. "I couldn't let you start your marriage with this lie between you. And I couldn't let Dad give you the company when you're about to be going through a divorce." Something snapped inside me then. Years of being overlooked, of trying to prove myself, of playing by the rules while Amber did whatever she wanted, it all crystallized into perfect clarity. If she wanted to destroy my wedding day, I would make sure everyone knew exactly who she was. I stood slowly, smoothing the front of my wedding dress. The room was so quiet you could hear the wind in the maple trees outside. "How considerate of you to be concerned about my marriage," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Tell me, when exactly did this concern begin? Before or after you started sleeping with my fiancé?" Whispers erupted around the tent. Ryan tried to speak again, but I silenced him with a look. "Since we're all being honest tonight," I continued, "let me share something with our guests. 3 months ago, I found something interesting while updating our company accounting system. Unauthorized payments from our marketing budget to a shell company. Over $200,000 missing over the past year." My father's face drained of color. "Julia, this isn't the place." "Oh, I think it's exactly the place, Dad. Just like Amber thought this was the place to announce her pregnancy."
I turned back to the crowd. I tracked those payments. They were authorized by Amber, who apparently has been embezzling from Reynolds Pure to fund her little side business, a CBD product line she's been developing with a competitor. Gasps echoed through the tent. Amber's triumphant expression faltered. "That's not— you don't understand," she stammered. "I understand perfectly," I said. "I confronted her privately 3 months ago. She begged me not to tell Dad, swore she'd pay it back, said it would kill him to know what she'd done. So I kept quiet. I even set up a repayment plan for her. I was protecting you while you were sleeping with my fiancé." Ryan stepped forward.
"Julia, please, can we talk about this privately?" "There's nothing private about betrayal, Ryan. Not anymore." I turned to face my father. "Congratulations on your retirement, Dad, and on your new grandchild. I'm sure Amber and Ryan will do a wonderful job running the company together, since that's clearly what they've been planning." My father looked stricken. "Julia, don't leave like this. We can fix this." "Fix what? My marriage? The company? The fact that you've always favored Amber no matter what she does?" The words poured out of me, years of unspoken resentment finally finding voice. "There's nothing to fix. It's already broken." I unclasped the Reynolds family necklace my grandmother had given me that morning, a maple leaf pendant in gold that had been passed down 3 generations. I placed it on the table. "I resign as CEO before I've even started," I said. "The company is all yours. It always was." I walked out of the tent through the crowd of stunned guests parting before me like the Red Sea. Behind me, I could hear my mother crying, my father shouting at Amber, and Ryan calling my name. But I didn't look back, not even when I heard the crash of what I later learned was my father flipping our wedding cake table in rage. As I reached my car, still in my wedding dress, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Susan, my mother's oldest friend and the company's financial advisor. "Julia," she called, hurrying to catch up. "You can't just leave." "Watch me," I replied, fumbling with my keys. Susan grabbed my wrist. "No, I mean, you literally can't leave. What you said about the embezzlement, we need to document everything. This isn't just family drama, it's corporate fraud." I spent my wedding night in Susan's guest room, surrounded by financial documents instead of wedding gifts. By morning, we had compiled enough evidence to prove that Amber had been systematically siphoning company funds for almost 2 years. The shell company she'd created, Maple Valley Wellness, was developing a line of CBD-infused maple products in partnership with our biggest competitor. "Your father needs to know the full extent of this," Susan said as we reviewed the files. "This isn't just about money. It's about company secrets, product formulations." I was numb by then, operating on autopilot. "Then tell him, I'm done protecting her." What I didn't expect was my father showing up at Susan's door 3 hours later, looking like he'd aged a decade overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his usually impeccable clothes rumpled. "Is it true?" he asked without preamble. "All of it?" I nodded. "I have the proof right here." He sat heavily on Susan's couch, head in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me when you first discovered it?" "Would you have believed me?" I asked quietly. "Or would you have accused me of trying to sabotage Amber's reputation?" His silence was telling. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Ryan moved out of our apartment and in with Amber, though rumor had it they were already fighting constantly. My father called an emergency board meeting where he presented the evidence of Amber's embezzlement. She was removed from the company immediately, and the board voted to pursue legal action despite her pregnancy. I stayed at Susan's, ignoring calls from my mother and from childhood friends who wanted the gossip.
The only person I spoke to was my grandmother, who drove from her retirement community in New Hampshire to see me. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," she said, holding my hands in her weathered ones. Not for exposing the fraud, though that took courage, but for walking away from something that didn't honor your worth. 3 weeks after what the town now called the Reynolds wedding disaster, I received an unexpected visitor. Tyler, Ryan's best man, showed up with a box of my things from the apartment. "Ryan asked me to drop these off," he said awkwardly on Susan's porch. "He couldn't face me himself?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "He's dealing with some stuff. Amber lost the baby. Or, well, there never was a baby." I stared at him. "What? She lied about being pregnant to force Ryan to leave you." He looked genuinely sorry. "When he found out, he confronted her, and she admitted she thought once you were out of the picture, your dad would make her CEO instead." The revelation should have hurt, but instead, I felt an odd sense of relief, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. A month after my non-wedding, I received another visitor, my father, looking older but somehow more humble than I'd ever seen him. "The board wants you back," he said as we sat in Susan's garden, "as CEO. It was unanimous." I shook my head. "I'm not coming back, Dad." "Julia, please, the company needs you. I need you." "I've spent my entire life trying to earn your approval," I said, "trying to prove I was worthy of the Reynolds name and legacy. But I realize now that I don't want it anymore." What I didn't tell him was that I'd been approached by Vermont Green, our biggest competitor and Amber's former secret partner. After the scandal broke, they distanced themselves from her but reached out to me. They wanted my expertise, my innovation skills, and they were offering me creative control over a new product line, with my name on it. 6 months later, Julia's Pure launched in stores across New England, a line of organic, ethically sourced maple products that quickly gained a following. My father sent me a bottle of champagne with a note that simply read, "You were always meant for greater things than what I had planned for you." Reynolds Pure struggled in my absence. Without my modernization efforts, and with the scandal hanging over them, their sales dropped significantly. My father officially retired, not by choice, but by board demand. They brought in an outside CEO who lacked the personal connection to the business. As for Amber and Ryan, their relationship imploded spectacularly within 2 months. Ryan moved to Boston, and Amber left Vermont entirely after her court date for the embezzlement charges. She was sentenced to probation and restitution payments. Last I heard, she was working at a yoga studio in Arizona, telling everyone she's a survivor of corporate America. The most unexpected outcome of this whole ordeal was my relationship with my mother. After 3 months of silence between us, she showed up at my new office with an old family recipe book. "I thought you might want to try some of these in your new products," she said hesitantly. "Your grandmother's maple walnut cookies always sold out at the church bake sale." It was her way of saying she supported my new path. We started having weekly lunches, rebuilding our relationship without Amber or my father between us. For the first time, she saw me, really saw me, as my own person, not in comparison to anyone else. The grand gesture of being named CEO had transformed into something I never expected, true independence. The maple leaf pendant that had been passed down through generations of Reynolds women now sat in my desk drawer, a reminder of where I came from, but not a chain binding me to a future I didn't choose. A year after my wedding that wasn't, I received an invitation to Susan's retirement party. She was leaving her position at Reynolds Pure to become my company's financial advisor. At the party, I saw many familiar faces from my former life, including my father. He seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating. "Your company is doing well," he said, nodding appreciatively. "I see your products everywhere now." "Thank you," I replied, no longer needing his approval, but appreciating it nonetheless. "I was wrong," he added, surprising me, "about a lot of things, but especially about what makes a true Reynolds. It's not blind loyalty to the family business. It's innovation, integrity, and resilience. You have all three." Today marks 2 years since what should have been my anniversary, but instead became my Independence Day. My company just expanded nationally, and I'm dating someone who values honesty above all else, a quality I've come to appreciate more than I ever thought possible. Sometimes, the most painful betrayals lead us exactly where we need to be, even if we can't see it through the tears at the time. People often ask if I regret what happened at my wedding: the humiliation, the public spectacle, the family fracture. I don't. What I regret is all the years I spent trying to earn love and recognition that should have been given freely. What I regret is not valuing myself enough to demand better treatment sooner. Family isn't just about blood or maple syrup businesses passed down through generations. Sometimes it's about the people who stand beside you when everyone else is staring in shock. Sometimes it's about finding your own path, even when it takes you away from familiar trees. If you're going through your own family drama or betrayal right now, remember that what feels like an ending might actually be the beginning of something better, something that's truly yours. If you found value in my story, please subscribe to hear more about finding strength in unexpected places. And remember, the sweetest success is the kind you create yourself on your own terms.